skill development while we are in this very, very unprecedented time. We at ACF, as many of you may know, entered skill training about 15 years ago when we saw an opportunity. We work in rural India, and we saw an opportunity where there were a huge number of unemployed young people in our communities with fragmented pieces of land, not really skilled, and really we felt that, you know, they needed to have a dignified life and livelihood. And on the other hand, we saw this huge potential because there was especially the small and medium sector, also the large sector, which continuously had a need for better skilled people. And that's where we embarked on this. And it has been really our fastest growing vertical within Ambuja Foundation. Our model is an institution-based model and evolved experientially and through partnerships. We built partnerships, we learned along the way, whether it was about the way we did our selection, the pedagogy, whether it was how we managed placements with some innovations there, how we had to just manage with local trainers and actually train a lot of trainers. All of this was a very experiential experience. And we are delighted that today, you know, we are working with all of these who are on our as our esteemed panelists today, among the others as partners. Now, we thought we had the model in place and we were all scaling up beautifully when COVID hit us early this year. And we realized that, you know, we needed to modify, we needed to change our ways, and we did. We did make some changes. We are still not there. We really believe that there is a lot to learn from each other as we go ahead. But as we speak, we have about 124 batches with about 3,000 odd young men and women today being trained online, and looking forward to employment post this COVID or post this lockdown, as one may. Assessment methods also obviously needed to change, and that's another thing that we are all grappling with, and I'm sure we will have Professor Mishra throwing some light on some of these things as well. Amidst this scenario, I am really delighted that we have a very, very eminent panel today to discuss some of these issues with us. It's a diverse panel. We've deliberately kept a very diverse group. So we have Vandana Bhatnagar, who is the Chief Program Officer at NSDC. I mean, one can't not talk about NSDC if one is talking about skilling in India, right? And Vandana, of course, in her previous stint has been with the World Bank, has been leading strategy and policy level work there. Professor Mukti Mishra, who is the president and founder of the Centurion University of Technology and Management, based in Odisha, the first multi-sector private university which was actually formed with the Legislature's Act, and believes himself in rights to livelihoods with dignity. And that's what makes him a really important academic voice on this table today. Nusrat Pathan, who really heads CSR at HDFC, and with corporates taking such an interest in skilling, we thought that we had to get a corporate voice on this table. They have their own needs for skilling, and we also want to hear that piece. And Nusrat, of course, herself comes with a very, very strong understanding of the social sector and the corporate sector, and a belief in partnerships. And we are partners together, and I know how much we've achieved only because we've decided to partner. So thank you, all of you, for joining us on this webinar today and agreeing to share your thoughts with our participants. Today, we can see we have about 500 plus people who've joined us. We have NGOs, we have skill entrepreneurs, we have CSR teams, we have government, we have a whole lot of stakeholders here with us today. So the way we are going to run this, as we've already discussed, is that we will run around the table with a couple of questions that you would like to share on this relevant topic. And we would really like to keep the last half an hour for the burning questions that will come from our participants. So I'd like to first start by really asking each one of you, how do you see the changing priorities in the skill development scenario during these times? What adaptations do you think we really need to make now that we are in these COVID times? So can I please begin with starting with Vandana? Vandana, would you like to go first?
Sure. And thank you so much. This is a very special occasion, and I think Gujarat Ambuja Foundation has done excellent work even in our partnership with the foundation, the scale across the country, across sectors is something which really points towards a very high impact engagement. So from NSDC, I think it's been a very valuable partnership. As you correctly pointed out, this has been a period of huge disruption. And we are all, I think, acutely aware of the many, many ways in which things have been changed. Some maybe on a transient basis, but some as a permanent change. And I think one of the most significant changes which has happened for our ecosystem in the skills sector is the huge and rapid shift towards digitalized processes. And that's something that's not going to reverse. It's something which is here to stay. And we had been seeing, of course, a lot of discourse and interest in engaging with technology to scale up skilling programs more rapidly, improve the learning, but it was kind of happening incrementally. So the default was classroom formats, and the digital formats were nice to have, or where maybe there was something which couldn't be delivered in a classroom format. So it was a kind of an optional mode. But today we've actually got the reversed situation where digital will be the default format, and where that is not possible, we will have classroom interactions, of course. So that entire effort to transition from what was essentially a classroom format to a digital format has happened really in a real-time mode at kind of supersonic speed. And partners such as you, as well as the sector skill councils, have worked overtime to enable this transition to happen. From NSDC, our effort has been to play a kind of capacitating role, as well as coordinating with the sector skill councils to create new protocols for this new kind of format of training delivery. So over the last 4-5 months, what we have seen is, of course, a lot of engagement from the training partners. We've had many sessions for trainers to orient them. About 5,500 plus have been oriented on online delivery. On the eSkill India platform, which is our aggregator for digital content, we've seen an exponential increase. So currently there are about 2.3 lakh course enrollments, which is tenfold increased, if not more, compared to the pre-COVID situation. And we have about 25 knowledge partners who bring together about 400 courses in the platform itself. And in the larger ecosystem of those partners, there are about 4,500 courses. These include a large number of qualification packs as well. Delivery. And on the assessment side also, as well as training of trainers, a lot of work has been done to identify which are the training programs that can be transitioned. And the good news is that a large percentage have been identified as having the potential to be partly, if not fully, delivered in an online mode. So over around 90% of the qualification packs have at least partial capability to be assessed online, if not full. And over 70% of the QPs have the capacity to be transitioned to online training delivery, and even the same kind of number for training of trainers. So on the whole, I think we have very quickly made ourselves and our ecosystem at least mentally prepared, and to a large extent even operationally moving in that direction to move to a digital format as a predominant mode. The big question, of course, will be the digital divide in terms of access to devices, access to internet connectivity. And your organization is working in many rural areas where probably the challenge is even more acute. So the issue of how do you address the digital divide is the question that will have to be answered very quickly. And probably foundations can play a role to make that gap a little less. I think going forward in the future, the country as a whole will have to figure out whether it's easier to address the digital divide or address the gaps which were there in the skilling and education infrastructure. And my guess is the digital divide might be faster and easier to address than addressing what would be what's already a huge gap in terms of the infrastructure access to the number of youth in our country. So the Localization bit is just one big part, I think, of the shift. And the second quick thing which I'll touch upon would be in terms of the skill mix. It's changing. There is a hyper localization that's happening between supply and demand because of challenges of movement. So in that context, what we are seeing is one need for granular real-time demand side information. And for that, we have worked with a company which is based in Bangalore, and that's one of the initial partners, where there'll be more in the future, where basically a skill management information system has been operationalized called ASEEM under the Ministry of Skill Development. And this will provide granular information of jobs and availability of people. So currently there's uploading happening of reverse migrant people who have come back from outside India as well as within India. Large numbers are being uploaded to help connect them. And the other aspect of this localization would be making people ready to what is available as now the jobs. It may not be the same as what they did earlier. So there'll be need for reskilling, upskilling, and in a sense, a move towards lifelong learning. And that's something which new models will have to be created. Some of our training partners have done good work creating very, very quickly training packages for sanitization entrepreneurs and combined kind of entrepreneurial models. So these, I think, would be the broad things I'd like to mention out here right now.
Super. Thanks, Vandana. These were indeed very interesting, and this is what we wanted to get some thoughts as how NSDC is looking at this. So great to get this perspective from you. Nusrat, can I move to you, please? And can you tell me what you think are your priorities? How do you see this panning out? Over to you, Nusrat.
So, thanks. Firstly, Paul, I'd like to really thank Ambuja for giving me this opportunity, to address the audience. And, a lot of it, Vandana has already spoken about in terms of the issues that one is facing, and, the way one needs to really modify our entire approach to skilling. And I think I'm with her on that completely. One couldn't emphasize, more on the need for upskilling and reskilling in times like this, because as pointed out, things have changed and things are there, and this is going to be the new normal. So one has to quickly adapt to this. I think given that for us the impact on skilling is largely going to be, or is envisaged to be in the unorganized sector. And for us, with a large population being in the unorganized sector, I think the impact for us is that much more. A lot of our investments are in skilling students who do come from challenged backgrounds. And that really multiplies the entire, the challenge of reaching out to these children through, alternate methods or technology, so to say. So while a lot of our partners have moved online and are trying to deliver, a lot of modules in terms of skilling and life skills in particular to these students, there is definitely a long way to go. And the challenges, largely would remain in terms of the infrastructure that needs to be created around delivering this new and more evolved pedagogy. The entire emphasis on, not just the curriculum that one is meeting out, but the entire focus on life skills that one needs to actually look at in, in addition to what we are teaching these. And taking a step back, the entire need to relook at what are the trades one is actually, training these students in. So we have actually, with our partners, been working on a lot of on rewriting the entire need and the way in which the programs are going to be delivered, in addition to what are the skills that we're going to teach, with an emphasis on livelihoods. Because ultimately what we're going to be looking at is, what is the time frame that these youth or these people in the community actually have to hold on to, because they've got to go out and they've got to start earning a livelihood, right? So, we are actually working in, on two fronts. So with the youth, yes, certain level of technology which has been introduced, etc., and we are looking at it. Challenges remain in terms of placement and also now in terms of mobilization. So for us, for the programs which we were about to set out, Mobilization has also become a little bit of a challenge. Getting children back into classrooms, our capacities have been reduced by 20. Close to 20% of what we were delivering. And I think here, as a corporate, one would like to see that, while we do recognize that there are challenges in funding right now, specifically with our livelihood and our skilling projects, there is also an ROI that one has to present to the organization at a large in terms of what is the impact that one has created. And I think here, for a moment, while skilling is important, and we will move towards technology assisting us in achieving that. I think one needs to also look at developing and delivering a complete package of services to these children, because in addition to the skills, this new generation is going to have to be equipped with a lot more. They are going to have to be more adaptable. They have to be more resilient, patient. I think these are the skills that are extremely essential for them in actually seeing them through this. These very, very challenging times. And I think that is very, very important to address. In a couple of our projects, what we looked at is mentorship, because these are times where, on the one hand, you have a lot of corporate talent, so to say, which is working from home, available, is in the right emotional space where, you want to do something, but you're homebound. And you also have, a whole cadre of youth who are looking for direction, who simply may want someone to talk to. I think this is a great meeting ground. If we can match the two and, try and see how, a mentorship program can be developed, I think that can really have far-reaching effects, not just in, providing them with the job opportunities and the skill, because that will take its course, but it's actually helping them find a direction for themselves. And also to handhold them through this entire thing, because things are evolving by the day. Something may be very relevant now, you don't know how it's going to be. Just as we as corporates, have, we work on contingencies, we have various plans that are in place in terms of business continuity, etc. I think those are the skills that one would have to teach a person, even at an individual level. I think it is these skills that will actually help students too. So I think that's extremely essential. The other opportunity actually I see here is in collaborative efforts, because we are talking on the one hand about challenges of hardware. You may be having corporates, or you may be having trusts which have the wherewithal or the USP of actually delivering the training. You have, on the other hand, corporates who are to an extent content or want to not get into the technical training delivery, but would much rather donate, so to say, equipment or material. I think here is an opportunity for us to come together on what is our comfort zone, so that one can actually go down and impact the community in a meaningful way. So there is an opportunity that I definitely see, once each of us have found our own comfort. Because let's not forget that for us in these times, monitoring in another thing is extremely difficult. A lot of programs that on field are being implemented by our partners. There is a level of trust that obviously the entire sector works on. Nevertheless, there is a lot of monitoring that is required to be done. With mobility being a challenge, technology is also our solution. Our only solution. And for those who actually haven't moved at an advanced stage of developing that, I think instead of jumping on the field, if they can actually have collaboration with people, with trusts, with organizations that are already present on field and delivering, that would make so much more sense, and would be a win-win for all.
Oh, fantastic. I think you brought some really, really interesting dimensions to it, because this whole business of skill, life skill that you talked about and mentorship, I think one can't really undermine that at all. And also this thing about collaboration and partnership, and you absolutely said it. I mean, without that really, and each one of us brings a little different kind of a resource on the table. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Nusrat. We'll come back to you in a bit. So, Professor Mishra, over to you. I mean, you've been really responsible, for setting up this whole university, and have had a very strong view, have been in the skill space for a long time, talking to the government, seeing how this whole thing developed. Would love to hear your views on this new situation that we've been thrown into. Yes, over to you, Professor Mishra.
Thank you very much. I echo the sentiment about your efforts, the way my previous speakers expressed, and NSC has been part of my.
Oh, we've lost him. We've lost you.
Yeah, I am back again now. So this is, we are talking about it to be vocal for local. We are now being vocal for virtual. So I think that virtualness, this internet has to support to be virtual. But anyway, so as I think you have briefed, we started our journey with this life, living and livelihood with decency and dignity, and to have dreams through the skilling process, because we started working from the Naxal belt or the tribal belt. And the model which we followed is experiential, hands-on and practice-oriented, by combining teaching, training, production and productivity. Most of our training, which we have done 2.5 lakhs or 3 lakhs youth as of now, citizen of the country. So they all go through that teaching, training, production and productivity, and everybody has to go through the production process. So our model, and it's all residential. So for us, it is a big jolt because ours is just not output, it's output, outcome and impact based, and we work very closely with the community. And so that brings us to a difficult phase because of this kind of things what is happening now. So the digital divide, which Vandana Bhatnagar mentioned, is becoming actually a digital partition. It's very difficult to penetrate the partition, and we are struggling how to reach out to people and how you make this thing use technology. And we have been working both on onward migration and also reverse migration. We have brought back many what we call in Odisha Dadan Shramik, or what they call their bonded labor type of things, which have been brought back, and they are now doing cultivation because we work with the farmers. We started turmeric and oil evaluated products, and we're starting from rice to bread production to high-end products for jets and aircrafts. So we do a lot of production. So we have also this reverse migration. Always has been part of us. But this is not a reverse migration. This is an exodus from cities and inundation of villages. And that's the challenge. And we are struggling. And one thing which we have realized, that there are a lot of positive externalities from the agri and allied sector. So out of this, people who are coming back to the village, a small percentage, not large percentage, could bank upon to bring the new ideas and create agri or allied sector enterprises which can cater to the local market. So it is like local resource, local enterprise, local demand, nothing to do from an entrepreneur of its more merit sending to elsewhere. It is just, again, that life, living and livelihood with decency, dignity, and also have a dream. So that remains the core of entire purpose. But Odisha is also being remote, and it is also heavily, in fact, affected by this COVID. So we are still waiting. How do we do that? Because it's still at some point it needs the touch and feel concept. You have to talk to people. You have to bring that on board. That somebody can look at your eyes and build that trust. How do you build the trust? Technology doesn't build the trust. Technology builds the learning, but learning comes much afterwards than building the trust. And initially, when this happened, we have been suggesting to government, and we will pursue that. And in fact, we also request you that we should have the RPE and RPL, that mapping should be done, recognition of prior experience and recognition of prior learning. It is not about the prior learning per se. And on that basis, There could be both vertically and horizontal skilling. So what you call upskilling, reskilling, and all these things, I don't call it upskilling, reskilling. I say it is a vertical because why I say so. And you mentioned about the certification. Now a time has come, each state has to engage their state council for vocational education for certification. We are a certification body or awarding body or SSCs. But gone are those. SSCs can prepare models or modules and SOP, QP, all these things they can do. But certification should come from State Council for Vocational Education or from any university or from board. There is a reason why for that. One reason is that because people will not move. Wherever we are talking, Odisha, as you know, Odisha is one of the migrant states, migrant workforce states. And people say for next 6 months we will not go. Next 1 year we will not go. We'll explore what we can do here. So what you do during this 1 year? So what I have been suggesting, and I will insist on suggesting that people have passed 10 or they have got work experience. I'm not talking about learning, work experience. Can we give credit and give them ITI certification as a private candidate, which we have the system, or we give them diploma certificate so that when they go back, they go a certified skilled workforce instead of going as just a laborer. So then industries can become more inclusive and can hire the lower level for the lower level of work. Okay, then they can graduate to the next level. So that vertical mobility should be an approach which both industry, education, ours, organizations like yours, this just time, this is the fix it. No, we have to think hence 3 years. A long term is 3 years. I'm talking a 3 years plan is very, very essential. Then, building council, that network of counseling through NSDC, Sector Skill Council, FICCI, CII, all these industry bodies led by NSDC must have online counseling for people to build confidence. Counseling for confidence is very essential so that people have that. I know that time is not right, but system.
Your voice is
nice that you do that counseling. Okay.
I think there's a bit of an internet problem at your end. We're not able to hear you clearly. Or is it only with me? No. Yeah, I think we've lost him again. So Professor Mishra is raising some very important issues. Besides RPE and RPL, I think what I picked up was that, he's seeing that at least in the tribal and the rural migrants, and I'm sure they've seen a lot of them because Orissa has seen that influx coming back. Go ahead.
I was talking about the counseling, and we have to create that, parameters and processes and the protocol. How we do that, and where I will request NSDC to take a lead. And involving SSC, FICCI, and CII. This is just to build the confidence that tomorrow you can go back to the thing. What are the precautions they have to take? That's why I say, next is that there is, as I told you, there is a capacity absence and deficit in the village to absorb this kind of influx. Okay, and we should not say that there will be local area jobs. And as I told you that there is something which we can do, that allied sector and agri sector, that should be very, very essential to work out and bring out a specific policy for nano and mini entrepreneurs. That what can be done. That for nano and mini entrepreneurs, that means by somebody by self or just group of people joining. So that nano mini enterprises, what can be done? Can we use the PMKKs? Can we use that? Ministry is working probably on that, but I'm not aware of it. But that has to come from there. The next comes that the national policy is now time to think about national policy like right to education, right to skilling. It's time now that people like you, Paul Madam, and Vandana Madam, you people have to now spearhead that. We need right to education. We should have right to skilling. And those things can be done at a broad-based basis, and then it becomes because without skill, what can you do? And I'm defining skill later on. When I come to, I will define. You can't do anything. Everybody complains that we don't have skilled manpower, but we have oversupply of human resource. So what is the gap? Is the skilling or is the competency? So I'll define that in a minute. For me, the skilling is basically to build the capacity and competency to do a job with least resources with the highest output and outcome. So then that's how do you do that? So, I think that, SDFC, like organizations like SDFC or yours, there should be a CSR nexus for skill next. So you should create a nexus of CSR bodies for skilling next. And that should come through the right to skilling. And this is my feeling that, I've been talking about it for a long time, but the time has come now. How you see the skilling in a different way. So that's how, it comes in. And then, I know that I'm conscious of the time, but I think all these things put together, more than before, it has come that now the industry bodies have to play a more significant, prominent, and quantifiable role in this, so that it is the ASCHAM, whether it is Chamber of Commerce, I don't know. So they have to play a bigger, better role, and they have to be more inclusive. You can't, even though, that's why I said that, vertically and horizontally skilling. So people who get vertically skilled and SCTVT or State Council for Vocational Education certifies them. If they were workers, now can they become supervisors or foremen, next level, and you bring in new kind of things. So that they can be more inclusive in that. So these are, few thoughts.
Right. No, I can't agree with you more, Professor Mishra, because, a lot of what you say resonates with us. We saw when this whole influx, when this whole thing happened, and we decided that we were going to touch base with as many as we could of our past trainees. And I think our team actually reached out to about 35,000 of our ex-trainees. Some had lost jobs, some had returned, some didn't want to go back, some were still in a state of confusion. So I think all three of you have, even Nusrat mentioned this need for life skills, and you're saying that there's so much of a need for online counseling, and that I agree with you. Maybe all these industry bodies, corporates need to get together, work closely with NSDC. We have always, and look at how do we bring in this whole thing of skill next? How do we bring in this confidence building? But this, I can't really agree with you more on some of the things you said. So that brings us straight away to this issue, which you've already touched upon, of reverse migration. And we realize that in Orissa, you must have seen a huge influx of that, because we know that there were a large number of Orissa migrants outside who kind of gone back, and we don't know how they're thinking now and how they're going to think in future. So for people like us who in Ambuja Foundation, where we deal with rural prosperity, this has also been a huge concern, and it has also been a huge opportunity. One, because like Nusrat said, there is a possibility, and as you said, Professor Mishra, of looking at the next level of skilling. How do we in this time skill them, whether you call it upskill or re-skill, or you build the confidence to allow them to feel the confidence to go back. Because if they stay back and they really are unemployed youth again, we are going to go back to a strain on the rural economy, which is, which has started looking up, because some of these people have brought back money home. Today, they've all just gone into Manrega jobs and all that, but how long will that last? So I think really, this migration issue is here to stay for some time. And I'd love to hear each one of you talk about any perspective that you have on that. Nusrat, can I go with you on this?
Sure.
What is your thought on this migration? Do you have a view on this?
So, yes, Pearl, as you're aware, a large part of our work is, in rural areas, working on rural development, so to say. Even as we talk, we are currently active in close to 900 villages pan-India. And these being concentrated in a lot of the areas which are more developmentally challenged, we have seen an influx of a lot of people coming back home, what you'd call a reverse migration. I think prompted us definitely to relook at what we were doing, the way we were doing, and actually do a little bit of a course correction in terms of what were our plans for that particular village. Because definitely there is a strain on the economy, because you have a lot of people coming home. You have a lot of health challenges, so there's definitely a need to address that. And of course, you can't be talking about health, etc., when you're not able to deliver on incomes. So that has been a very real situation that we've looked at. What we have done is that in our entire plan for that particular village, wherever there was a need for infrastructure, there was a need to work on any sort of soil and water issues or NRM activities, we've actually moved that forward to be able to provide livelihoods to people who've come in and to actually use them effectively. So that is something that we've done, but that again is very temporary. As you said, linking them up to Manrega, ensuring that they are registered for on the various government portals, etc. That is something that is a given, which you are basically doing to prompt livelihoods. But the fact remains that today we don't know what the situation is going to be a month from now. Are these people going to stay? Are these people going to be coming back to cities because employers are already luring them back because work needs to start, economies, things need to function. A lot of people are trickling back in as well. So I think right now everything that we are doing is more of a stopgap arrangement where we are temporarily giving people employment and not creating any long-term plans, because I think it's too early to preempt what it's going to be like a month from now. But definitely looking at what are going to be the options. The people that have come back, it is not going to be possible or easy in any ways to sustain them back into the village and retain them there, because a lot of these are very, very small land holdings. So even if you're talking about supplementary livelihoods, which we are promoting in a lot of our villages, it's not going to be enough to be able to help create a livelihood for all and do justice to all these people. So definitely I think people will start coming back. So we've actually got to wait, watch, and then evolve our programs accordingly. So that's what we've been doing. Pearl, I think what also somewhere I must mention here is there is a lot of opportunity here. We've also seen because with technology that's come in, we've seen that people are more connected. It's taken away the market challenge. So, we've been able and successful to actually link up a lot of groups to the market. So that's something that's really worked in our favor, and that's something that can really be leveraged, especially for these rural. We've seen women come forward as entrepreneurs. So I think that's another dimension which, I think we were also at one point chatting about, that this has, from an opportunity point of view, both in urban as well as in rural areas, given women an opportunity actually to be more, how do you say, contributing members of the entire economy.
Right. No, and I think Professor Mishra also talked about this thing of, those who have come back with already some skills may also come with an aspiration, and there might be actually an opportunity to also look at micro enterprises growing within the rural. A long time India has been talking about also creating the facilities which are not existent in rural areas, and I think this might also be an opportunity to use some of those skilled people there. But Vandana, would love to hear from you in terms of how is NSDC looking at this whole reverse migration issue, and do you have some thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, so I think this obviously is front and center in terms of the priority and the challenge that is there, and in some states much more so, where people have migrated back in very, very large numbers. So I think there are multiple engagements and interventions that are needed, and some of it will be nuanced to different state contexts. But I think the first effort is to, yes, capture the profiles of the people who moved back by the state governments, district authorities, and that data is being shared by them in various formats with NSDC, and we are working with them to convert those into profiles which can be connected to jobs where they are available. And you're right that there will be people who might choose to stay back where they belong for longer, and there might be others who might be willing to move back to the cities, depending on the the employer, what they're offering. So the Job Connect is, I think, the first thing which has to happen. And there, one part is what we're doing, uploading data, as I said, on the ASEEM platform. For the returning migrants from overseas, about 20,000 profiles have been provided, and we are working on uploading that. For the returning within India, the migrants, that's about 20-odd lakhs which have been gradually uploaded. More will be coming in. So one is the Job Connect by completing the profile. The second is as Professor Mishra mentioned, about formally recognizing the skills which people already have. So RPL will be an important piece in that. And going forward, the ministry is very keen to have the RPL modality, maybe with some bridge courses being provided to the people so that they have a formal recognition of their experience and their expertise in whatever domain they were engaged in. And the third would be in terms of the entrepreneurship options and service options that can be explored to engage those who are not getting connected to meaningful wage employment and are yet having capacity to do a livelihood of their own. And that's something which needs a lot of effort, which will need corporates, the local authorities, the training entities to all come together to create these models and identify where the opportunities are. So from our side, we are reaching out for, what are the entrepreneurship options linked to supply chains, for example. So we've recently entered into a tie-up with Airtel Money. We are exploring with other large corporates on what entrepreneurship models can be facilitated, where it is linked to an established market proposition. And given that a lot of companies are looking to penetrate towards tier 2, tier 3 cities, we expect that this should be an area which should evolve and will provide good opportunities. And on the other side, the social and civic infrastructure, which needs to seriously get upgraded and has been neglected in many parts of the country, should also be seen as an area for people to get engaged. So we're working with the Jal Jeevan Mission to identify what are the skill requirements for addressing the mission requirements. And in that, things like the plumbing activity, the electrical function, the mason, all of those will be needed. And it might turn into a quasi-entrepreneurial model where multi-skilled people are becoming, mini entrepreneurs in themselves, providing these services to panchayats. So these, I think, will be evolving as we go forward. As Nusrat said, these are early days in terms of being able to predict what will be 9 months later, the picture. But looking at where the opportunities are emerging, there is active engagement going on. And I also endorse the view that the opportunities for women will widen, given that at least I've heard in many, many webinars, companies talking about now moving on a permanent basis to either work from home or very decentralized operations, which means that you do not have to have everybody sitting in a big tier 1 or a big metro. They could be sitting in small towns or very much more remote areas and working from them. So I think the challenges and barriers that women faced in terms of engaging with the workplace, whether it's for relocation or transit, etc., if those get reduced, then it offers more opportunities for women to engage in the workforce and generate livelihood opportunities. And lastly, I think the point made about counseling, mentoring is absolutely fully, I think, recognized, and it is absolutely vital. We are probably, a year late, if not more, in getting this done. But this is something that the ministry is highly cognizant of and is working very closely to embed the counseling bit into the next stage of government programming, into PMKVY 3 as and when it rolls out, because it's clearly recognized that without proper counseling, the entire value chain's efficiency comes down. And so does the experience of the candidate. If there's a mismatch between what his understanding is about the role that he's being trained for, and he spends 3 months in a program and emerges with, a dissatisfaction with what he's got connected to, it's a fairly high waste of resources and motivation. So counseling is absolutely critical. And of course, online platforms will be looked at, but under the government thought process, there's a keen interest to engage with district authorities, build up capacity of people at that level to provide that counseling support and that information connect for people at all levels in the social spectrum. So that's, I think, what I would like to share. And as I said, this is something where all parties, the collaboration bit is critical between connecting the industry requirements and the government authorities for social programming and credible counseling, agnostic of training interests, and the training providers who have to convert their centers into more of livelihood centers which is something training partners are themselves talking about, as Professor Mishra has mentioned also, of not being seen just doing a very, single model kind of programming, but to be providing counseling services, entrepreneurship, mentoring, financing, even interface, connecting them to banks. Those are the roles that now a lot of training centers see themselves performing, and the government is also seeing them as such, the PMKK especially. So this is where we are right now.
Super. Actually, it's music to our ears. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the rest of the panel as well, Vandana, because as you saw, these were some of the asks. I mean, this is some of what everybody is looking at NSDC for. And I can tell you that in our own experience, only in our 7 Rajasthan centers in the last 30-40 days, we've seen about 670 of our past trainees who've come back to their natives and were looking, and we've actually been able to retrain and replace them in about 588 of them, which is quite a number, and that requires a lot of effort on the ground. But the idea is to really counsel them to understand what skills they come back with, figure out what the local environment now requires. And like you rightly said, Vandana, there's a huge opportunity for social and civic infrastructure. We are seeing, for example, Vodafone wanting to come back from what you said, not have their centers or their BPOs in cities, but to come back to smaller places. People are working from home as technical agents for different technicians for different companies. So there's a lot of opportunity in this as well. And if we all work together with you in NSDC and with academia as well for whatever else needs to be done, I think there is an opportunity there. I always like to be optimistic and see the glass half full. So I hope we are on the right path. Dr. Mishra, you already did touch upon migration, but is there something that you'd like to add to this whole question or this whole conversation right now?
Yeah, look, I think first thing that as all of us, you, I, and everybody, we should empower NSDC more, because that's become the anchor. That's who is the anchor for the skill ecosystem.
Right.
NSDC remains that anchor. So we have a responsibility that NSDC should get more empowered or get more power to them in this I'm talking soft kind of authority to them to implement things. There's become a nodal agency. The other thing, I think we all must agree that there should be a study at some point. What is this en masse exodus? Why it happened from this? You can't ignore industrial belt. And you can't say that village people who have come back. Look, I think Vandana Madam mentioned, and I have my own reservations because I'm in the field. In my village, people who came back and wanted to start their own electric shop, but there were already people who are doing the electric work. So there was a war there. So, I had to speak to the Sarpanch to, interfere and try to dispute resolution. Now, dispute resolution also has become part of my day-to-day activities. So it is not about substitution. It is very simply supplementing. So one has to be very careful, even then multi-skilling, and one has to because you don't want to replace what is already existing. Somebody is doing pipeline, somebody is doing electrical, somebody is doing vehicle repair. But if somebody comes and says that, okay, I will do all the multi-skilling thing, then what these 3 people will do? Number 1. Number 2, as I mentioned that, how do we build resilience and immunity into the skilling ecosystem? There has to be, I think, seize the right person, and you have been working in the field. There must be a kind of study by all the industry bodies, government, NSDC, everybody, that why this mass exodus. It is not about empowering rural. What can we do in the industrial belt so that this kind of situation, we never know when next pandemic will hit us. So how we can assure that, okay, if you are there, be safe. Now everybody is saying, there is so much a movement against this, all the migrant workforce who have come back and said that they have brought this corona to our village. And they are also getting a lot of psychological beating there. So that's not a very happy situation. Okay, if you can't talk to them, this has to be recognized. People are not welcomed into their village. People are not accepted into the community. There are a lot of problems there. And that is becoming a mental health issue there. So this one is being a lot of mental health issue, not for just younger generation, but when they're coming back to the older generation and to their children. So everybody is getting infected. I know that is beyond our, we can't solve everything, but there must be a study by us that by forcing people for this huge exodus, that we have created another problem. And could you have stopped that exodus? Could you have done that kind of thing? Number 1. Number 2, what we do this kind of a resilience can be built. Whether like you have got any urban areas, government funds for the youth hostels. Should industry CSR funds connecting the dots, should they invest in creating the dormitories with safety measures so that they stay there instead of paying rent to someone? So can CSR, instead of just skilling, can we set an empowering ecosystem? How do we create the ecosystem? It is just not skill and getting them connected to a job. That is just one time. That's just an output. That is just visual. There are a lot of invisible, there are a lot of qualitative change which should be brought in, and that cannot be done overnight. But one thing which we have been insisting, and there are migration resource centers or support systems, but these are not institutionalized. So now is CSR fund, as I said that, CSR nexus for skilling next, it should be both on soft aspect, which anyway government will do, suppose backbone change, you can't do that. So what we can do in the industrial belt or the clusters, see that people are comfortable and they feel secure and safe to go back there. So that's I think I'll put forth that to all of you to consider.
No, I think this is a fantastic point. I must say, Professor Mishra, and I do recall a few years ago, us also talking about this need for migration centers, as we called it at that time, because, we were encouraging people to get skilled and go into places where then they were feeling lost. And then, this whole thing of where do they get a rental from? But of course, I must admit, we didn't pursue it with full force, and neither did many of our other partners. We never went around talking to that. But this is absolutely so important. And I really liked your idea of saying that, we need to empower the ecosystem. We need to empower NSDC, because finally they are the nodal people. I mean, they are the ones who will help us with this policy and all of that. So this is fantastic. I think we've talked about some really important points here with all our three wonderful panelists. Before I really close up and look at questions, I just wanted to go around all of you just saying, in the light of this discussion, would you like to give one powerful message from your end to our huge audience which is listening in today? So where shall I begin? Let me begin with you, Dr. Mishra, this time. One powerful message to the audience. And then we'll take question and answers after that. Professor Mishra, I think we've lost you, or you're on mute. Nusrat, will you go?
Sure. So I think the one message I'd like to leave for both the audience and more so for our youth, because ultimately we are talking about day-to-day skilling day, is to develop a mindset of a beginner, okay, and challenge whatever were our previous ways of doing things. Now, whether it is for the youth or even for us ourselves, as Dr. Mishra said, that, even the CSR professionals, instead of doing it skilling, why can't we look at the ecosystem? So challenge everything that we were previously going to do, develop an attitude of problem solving, of analysis, of critical thinking. And lastly, what I want to say is, I believe that in a scenario today, the most adaptive of people are the ones that are going to survive. So that's my message.
Great. So great messages. Challenge what we are doing and adapt as much as we can.
Okay. No, I'm back. So,
okay.
That I think my message will be to first thing, some people are asking questions. I'm privately responding to them.
No, we will ask you those questions again, because we may miss out what you really want to say. So right now, let's stick with your big message, and then we'll come to the questions.
There's a skilling, as I mentioned before, is for me is a capacity and competency building of citizenry to make the country productive. That's for me, skilling is that. Okay, so that's how you make a country productive, and this is the responsibility of everyone, especially people like you, I, who are in the position of making a difference. So we should ask one question: are we doing enough, or can we do more, or can we do better? So this question must be asked by each of us who are into this system. And from demand side, people who are recipients or the receiver of the skilling ecosystem, so they must ask that what is their belief, what is their belief in what they want to do. So what is that, but that is difficult because they don't know. So demand side skill is very weak in our country. But the supply side, which has been built over 10 years on the skilling ecosystem, so people should ask that, are we doing enough? And this should be part of each board, all companies in their CSR foundations, so that are we doing enough? Just is the number, and what is the productivity measure? Are we influencing the productivity of the country? Okay, so that's something, as I told you, that it's not output, it's not outcome, it's impact. So it is a combination of output, outcome, and impact. Are we doing enough? Yeah. So that's what my message is.
Super. Vandana, the main skilling voice here.
So I think, it's good to just go back to the points mentioned earlier, and heartening to hear the kind of support and endorsement that is being offered. I think the ministry is really going to be driving and leading a lot of these initiatives. And of course, NSDC is going to be putting all its best resources to ensure these happen. But I just want to, in terms of a takeaway, would like to reiterate that while we are in the midst of a huge disruption, but as Winston Churchill apparently said, never waste a good crisis. So we must probably take this opportunity to recognize some of the changes that have been pushed down, initially with some degree of trauma and pain, but probably were essential. And what would have happened in maybe 5 years' time is happening in 5 months' time. So we probably need to recognize the direction of change and ride it and maximize the opportunities that emerge from it. So becoming digitally smart, becoming very, very demand responsive, and recognizing where the opportunities are presenting themselves to be very agile and respond to them. And all three would apply, whether it's the trainee or training partners in the ecosystem or any other practitioner. I think agility, responsiveness, being digitally smart is going to be very, very vital going forward.
I just think that these were the best messages we could have given. I mean, we went from a range of, revisiting our strategy and challenging ourselves to Professor Mishra. I can vouch, at least for our organization, to all three of you for that matter, that Nusrat, we will definitely challenge ourselves and, relook at the way things are. We've already started adapting, but I'm sure there's a long road ahead. Professor Mishra mentioned about about asking ourselves this question of, are we doing enough? And Vandana so accurately talked about not just recognizing our change, the changes that we have made, but to piggyback on this opportunity that has arisen in front of us and to really become more, demand responsive, smart operationally, and agile. So I think these are fantastic messages to take back with us. And I think we've done very well on time. We are at 11 o'clock, and I think I'm ready to open to questions. I'm going to request my colleague Ravi Naise, who actually heads our whole skilling vertical, to help me with these clustering of questions. So Ravi, I hope you're going to be able to do that for us efficiently and keep to the time. I think Vandana made a request that she needs to leave by 11:15. So if there are questions specifically for Vandana, could you start with those?
Sure, ma'am. Yeah. Good morning to all, and thank you. There are a lot of questions in question box as well as in chat box. So it's I tried to club them together, and since Vandana ma'am, you are here, so there are a lot of questions for NSDC. So I will start with that. I will club this question. So what kind of courses are suitable in this changing scenario? Does NSDC is planning to change QP and losses to match with this online and virtual training methodologies? There seems to be some job linkage mismatch between industries and between the job seekers. So how are they addressing? So there are a couple of more questions. Shall I take that, or you would like to answer them, and then I will again ask?
Maybe you can wait, Ravi, till she takes some of these first.
Yes, I think that would be better.
Yeah, Vandana. Over to you. You're on mute.
So basically, you see the issue of what courses are appropriate, that really depends also on what geographies the centers are in and what target audience their training programs are addressing. But if you're looking at broad sectoral demand and what are data from the SMIs platform that we are seeing, there is a big surge in the logistics sector on delivery roles, on packing functions, warehouse functions. There's a huge demand there, as well as in facility management services. There is a very much, a demand supply mismatch where demand is exceeding current availability. And of course, in healthcare related services and EdTech, of course, at the higher end, the online, streaming entertainment sectors, these are seeing a fair amount of actual positive benefit from the entire crisis. So I would imagine, depending on who this candidate profile is and what their willingness to relocate is, these sectors could be explored for opportunities. And in terms of, the kinds of interventions that would be needed, they would be needing to be obviously following new protocols. And as far as the QPs are concerned, what we have done is reached out to identify which QPs have curriculum that can be delivered online. Currently, the mode of delivery is happening largely through virtual instructor-led training. So we've operationalized, tied up with platforms so that TPs can easily choose from one of them to run some of these classes. I believe a lot of them were using social media platforms like WhatsApp, etc., and Zoom. But some of these other platforms, which might be having better functionalities, like TCS Ion is coming on board, offering upgrad is provided free of cost for a couple of months. So these could be used. And other than that, of course, digital content is being aggregated. And here I'd like to make that little point, going back to the point of collaboration. CSR money, as well as training partner experience of what works, what doesn't work, SSC's understanding of curriculum and standards, all need to come together to enrich the e-content available. So I would really encourage all players to come together and collaborate on making the availability of e-content, and it could be on a financially viable revenue share basis, but that's very important. So the work is underway on identifying which QPs are amenable to online delivery, and where there is a COVID protocol that needs to be embedded in the training program, the Health Sector Skill Council is creating standard modules which can be adapted for various job roles and be embedded as part of the training program. So if there's a beautician training, now they'll have to do something different compared to what they did earlier. So those things are being incorporated into the programming. I'm not sure if I've missed out any of the other points that you mentioned. There were quite a few.
Ravi, you're on mute.
The NSDC is planning to continue this online or the virtual training modules which they are about to develop even after COVID situation?
It's there to stay now.
So the way it will be is that you will have a situation where, of course, under the market-based programs, the training partners are free to use whatever mode that they wish. And under the government programs, the option is going to be made available to use online training, and there will be provision made for reimbursement of the trainings that will be done in the online mode. And that is something that the ministry is currently working on the detailing of. So when we have PMKVY 3 coming out, there will be provision for online delivery as well, as against just a classroom delivery, which was there in the previous program.
So there are a couple of questions on entrepreneurship development as well. So what is the take of...
I think you're on mute, can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost a bit of that question. My audio was...
Okay. So there are a bit of questions on entrepreneurship development, micro enterprise development. See, this sector has been badly hit because of this continuous lockdown, and many small entrepreneurs has lost their business completely, and they are willing to divert. So how do you think NSDC will play a role in bringing them back on the track? And further, many migrants has come up, and they also wanted to start this micro enterprises, but their intention is again to go back to the their previous employment or previous engagement. So how do you think that how to tackle these issues of micro enterprises and those who wanted to go back again to their own?
Well, I think here we must recognize the, boundaries of how much can be done by the skilling ecosystem versus what there are other interventions which will also be needed. So clearly, entrepreneurship is very critical, needs to be supported by capacity building of people who are interested, have shown the inclination to go into entrepreneurship. But in the end, it also depends on the economic context and what are the opportunities in the market over there. And that needs intervention by other players as well and other as parts of the government ecosystem. So from NSDC, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendra provides for entrepreneurial mentorship, even facilitating, connecting them to financing opportunities under Mudra or from bank finance. And going forward, this will be strengthened further. And we do recognize that going forward, livelihood will be an important piece. So that entire engagement, whether it's through digital modules, we recently ran a campaign with Britannia for an innovation, a kind of a startup challenge for women. And 15 lakh people applied under that. And about 10, 15 of them were finally selected for funding. But between those two, about 15,000 women were selected to be able to access training on entrepreneurship skills. So we can provide the training and enabling process for capacitating them on getting going with an entrepreneurship journey. But the intervention needs financing, market opportunities also, and that is something which other players in the systems also have to engage on. So from NSDC, we will play the capacity building role and the connecting role where that option exists.
Yeah, thank you. Now over to Nusrat. There are a couple of questions on, I think HRDP program is also addressing education. So what do you think solid primary education foundation required for actually building these blocks of skill training? So what is your view on that? And this is also related to skilling during schooling. So what is your view on that? So how do you think about this issue? Yeah, over to you.
So to answer the first, right. So to question, I of course and very strongly believe that the importance of education cannot be negated, and that is essential as a founding stone for you for any purpose of skilling, whether it is skilling or livelihood. And so that remains and it holds its place in terms of importance when we're talking about the HRDP piece completely. I think more so increasingly introducing the concept of skilling into education, maybe at slightly higher grades. But here again, very carefully is very important, because you don't want to take away the focus from education and push children into skilling, right? Because you're talking about school education, so it's extremely important to see a balance between the two and see where you introduce the concept of skilling within the entire education scenario. We have worked in fact on a couple of projects with this etc. in Chhattisgarh, which have been innovative models and successful models, where we have introduced skilling within the curriculum of the syllabus. But this has largely been for students who are undergrads, but definitely in college and not in school. Soft skills is something that one can definitely introduce children to at an educational level. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So there are a couple of questions I would like to have views from Professor Mishra on this regarding see many graduates, even engineering graduates also. So they also need some fine skilling after their graduation, so to make them job ready. And how do you think that how do these things could be assessed and certified? So what could be the procedure on that? And second is regarding, see, in at Gram Panchayat level or at the village level. So the line department actually transforming many responsibilities of like drinking water, water harvesting, managing the infrastructure development to the panchayat. So now the need of actually building capacity of this panchayat leaders has also been arises. So your views on this, how do you wanted to actually look at this issue, Professor Mishra?
Thank you. Look, what is happening now, whether it is, if you see Google or Microsoft, everybody is talking about that we will leave the, brick and mortar building, people will operate from home. So for engineering, especially for engineering graduates, they have to value add, because see, a degree is just a degree. It is not about the competence. It is not about the skill they have. It's just a certificate. So that, whether it's mechanical, electrical, electronics, doesn't matter the degree. So they have to go and learn artificial intelligence, that what I call mixed realities, all these things. There are various. I'm not a technologically so advanced person, but in tourism management subject, what I teach, we are now making it also mandatory in Australia or wherever I teach, that they have to have the exposure to hybrid realities, mixed realities, artificial intelligence, virtual realities, all these things they have to go in. So there are many platforms now, they are providing this kind of thing, some free of cost, like for Dassault, which is that Rafael's designer. So there are a lot of design learning which they can do. So, always people say about design thinking. I said, think design, and then you upgrade yourself there, because you can capture these things. If I ask a graduate with history or geography background, he may find it difficult. But for an engineering background, to upskill, that's what I call vertical skilling or horizontal skilling, learning something in a related area will be more easy, and they have to do that. There's no choice in this, because it is like, graduation degree or BTech degree or BSc degree, just like a basic degree, like a metric degree or 10th pass degree. They have to upgrade themselves. This is the best time, because there is no job now. People are not going into the market, but once it opens up, there will be requirement. This is the best time for youth who are in the age group of between 19 to 24 to upgrade themselves with acquiring various skills. There are Coursera courses which are offered online. Some people can afford it, some people cannot afford. But there are many things which are being offered, like Vandana Madam was mentioning about upgrade giving free of cost. There will be many free of cost courses, and they must upgrade that. So, and that there are enough platforms to upskill them, number one. Number two, about coming to the village level, which you have brought it out. For last 4 years, we have been trying to build the capacity of Sarpanch and all the ward members on various activities which you mentioned, that drinking water measurements or the construction work, real-time basis. Okay, real-time basis. And even we have gone to the next level, saying that, okay, Sarpanch is having got a metric pass or 10th, 12th pass. Can we make them diploma? Can we make them also that bachelor in vocational education in civil, or all these kind of things? We have been struggling, but probably now governments of the day will listen to that more. But for sure, capacity. But again, this is nothing to do with the reverse migration which has happened. But the inherent capacity should be upgraded to make it more productive. Now there are a lot of wastage. How do you plug that wastage? Because they don't know that whether to use a particular machine in that land. In Odisha, like lands are very fragmented, unlike Andhra Pradesh. So, and they cannot use a tractor. Then what sort of small tiller they can use? But who will repair that? Can we have people? Can we have panchayats having somebody who is trained and employed on contract basis, user pay basis, to provide the service to the? I think in my village itself, there are 3-4 tractors are standing for last 6 months. The person from Cuttack has not gone to repair it. So these kind of things happen. So there are a lot of, how do we plug the wastage which is happening into the system? That's something a panchayat level is essential, and that can only be done through the skilling or upgrading or upscaling the skilling ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Professor Mishra. I would like to come to Mrs. Paul Tiwari. She has mentioned about online and virtual training started in ACF after this lockdown and during this crisis. So what are the challenges we have been faced during implementation of this virtual training for the trainees in rural area particularly?
So I have to admit that this fell on us. I mean, before we knew it. So it's not like we hadn't thought about it earlier. But I think, like Vandana very rightly said, we quickly adapted to what was thrown at us, rather than waiting for the next 2 years to get it done. But yes, I must admit that this doesn't go without its set of challenges, because we are in rural India. Internet bandwidth is a huge problem. Availability of basic technology is a problem. I mean, we today have students who are enrolled with us who have had to use their parents' mobile phone, or I mean, ideally, if each of them had a tablet, it would become that much easier. But how do we build in a cost for something like that, which is going to be, and how do we tax already poor people who've lost their jobs to really at this stage even think about, paying for something like that. So these have been some of our thoughts. Another area that I do want to talk about is a mindset of trainers. That, I mean, we've been having such a mindset of classroom teaching, that if we have to move from classroom to online teaching, mindset of all the trainers needs to change. I'm not saying it's not happening. Like I'm saying, this fell on us, our trainers and our entire team in the SEDI, as we call it, have really risen to the occasion. But there is a challenge in certain technical courses. There's only so much you can do on theory. So of course, like maybe BPO or retail can be taught online. But let's say electrical or welding, you do need that practical input. And so, of course, with social distancing, how do we break up the batches, call them at different times for practical training when things open up? These are some of the things that have been, questions in our minds, which we are obviously working with. Online assessments, how quickly can you assess groups which have finished their training and provide them that certification without delays? And I'm sure, I mean, we've had lots of delays in assessments all this time, but I'm optimistic again that with this whole thing becoming online and digitalized, things will move much, much faster on that as well. Then how do you provide a very important component of our training courses in those months when the student was with us or is with us, is on-the-job training and exposure visits to factory premises, to especially for wage employment. How do we manage some of that with the social distancing and the lockdown? And if this lockdown continues forever, how do we do it? So these are some of the questions and challenges we have been faced with. Our team, as I said, has been working round the clock to make things happen and to, make sure that all those who came back get back into some kind of work and start their livelihoods again. Because today, because of the skilling we've done, many of them have actually become the sole, the main bread earner of the family. In fact, as we speak today, 2 of our trainees are receiving that award of skill icon from the Chief Minister in Rajasthan. And one of them was a very, very small time person who's today done domestic electrician, set up his enterprise, is earning about 75,000, has recruited 3 people, has linked up to a whole lot of companies which needs the service technician. So there's a lot happening back there on the ground. But yes, challenges do remain. Yeah, Ravi, I hope I've answered the question. Ravi? Now Ravi is, yeah.
So some quick questions to Professor Mishra. Professor, so are we going for online assessment? Century University is planning.
Yeah. We are going for. In fact, somebody had asked that question. I had responded, and I asked my team. Yes, we are. We are ready, and we are going into time, because you have to, as Paul Madam was mentioning, that keeping also assessors need to be trained in that. So training the trainers, training the assessors, training the classroom support staff, even for the that network backbone, it collapses. Like we are talking, sometimes I'm losing out, missing out. So how do you do that? So you have to create the protocols. Suppose the line goes up. So we are ready, and we'll be introducing that soon.
Yeah, because this is really the need of the hour, I guess.
Yeah. By when you will be ready, so that we can.
We are ready today. As I speak to you today. Only as of yesterday, we got all the protocols and everything right.
Okay.
We also tested it, because you have to do the bug testing on that. But there will be still some problems. But yeah, we are ready to roll it now.
Yeah. One question for Nusrat ma'am. Is HDFC is coming out with a financial module for rural use, particularly in vernacular language?
We do have a financial module for rural youth on financial literacy, and I would be happy right now. A lot of our branch people are using that in rural areas. We'd be happy to share that.
Okay. It is available in vernacular and local language?
It is available in some of the languages.
Okay. One quick question, Mrs. Paul Tiwari, to you as well.
Okay.
So, how many, do you think that in this scenario, the wages of youth who are getting employed will increase or decrease?
Well, from what I'm hearing from my field teams, it looks like, I mean, it's an increase in livelihood because a lot of them are finding those local, I mean, they're getting skilled and they're getting those local jobs, which really means that, they will not, if they're going to work from home or closer to their own homestead, the chances are that they won't be paying the kind of rents that they pay in other areas, especially so I think for those people, it would be on an increase in terms of how much they are left with at home. But frankly, I don't have an answer. Ravi, you might be better equipped to give that answer actually. I don't know what you're seeing on the ground, but I think temporarily there will be a setback. But sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Our current data is actually showing that there is a substantial increase, because earlier in big cities, whatever wages they were getting, they are now able to get in local market as well.
Exactly. So a lot of the overheads, I mean, that they were paying for would be far reduced. I would think so.
I think I have covered most of the questions which I have tried to club together, and there might be some unanswered questions as well which are posted here in the question box. So we will actually share the feedback with you along with the views from the panelists on the questions which could not be answered over here. I am handing it over to Mrs. Tiwari for further conclusions and sum up.
Yeah, thank you, Ravi. Thanks for managing that for us. And I don't know if Professor Mishra, if there were any other burning important questions you saw there which Ravi was not able to take, or Nusrat for that matter. I don't know if Vandana is here or she's left. I think she may have already left possibly. Because she had sent us a message saying that she needed to go to another program being this World Skill Day today. So if there aren't any, then I will keep to our time and maybe do a conclusion. Is there anything, Professor Mishra, that you want to add in a minute?
Just because Mr. Ravi asked me about online assessment, though we are ready, but government has to allow us. We are talking to NSDA, NSDC, and also the ministry. If we can go ahead for the online assessment, we have not got the clearance yet, but we are hoping that we'll get the clearance to go for online assessment. But for the university system, we did all online examination. If they can allow for the BTech and MTech and everything, why not for the skilling ecosystem? So we will be seeking clarification. The moment it happens, we will roll it out. So just to assure that we are ready, we're just waiting for some clearance, which we will get soon.
I do hope that comes fast, because like you rightly said, if it could come for schools and colleges and university, there should be no reason why this shouldn't be rolled out for skilling sooner than later. Nusrat, do you have anything that you think you want to add in a minute?
Not really. I think a lot said and a lot covered, and very pertinent issues covered here in the session. All I do believe, as Paul you said on the livelihood piece, that there is enough and more opportunity, that one can create. And I for one, being from the corporate sector, I'm really hoping that we are able to better the gender equation here with the opportunities, and break away from the barriers of a typical corporate working scene. So that's my hope.
Lovely. So I'm going to use this opportunity to just kind of very briefly summarize. I think we had a really valuable early morning discussion on a day like this today. I'm really so thankful for the insights and the tremendous variation that we saw here We did talk about, developing the entire ecosystem. And what also came about powerfully is that together we can all do it, all these different stakeholder groups. We also need to empower NSDC to be able to, put the right policies in place and do the right kind of, take the right kind of steps in this scenario. Vandana stressed on this whole job database and the job connect that they're creating, which I think is very, very important, will help us dramatically for all the available jobs and the kind of trainees or the migrants we are seeing coming back or have come back already. We talked about types of courses, methods of delivering courses, digital technology, vertical skilling or upskilling as some people call it. There was a huge emphasis on life skills and mentorship, which I personally think is a great take home, and counseling. And if we can do that in for lots of people with the right kind of protocols, I think this will be a very big boost for those who've already, dealt with this stress and this lack of confidence that they possibly have now, this young people that we have. We also talked about building local enterprises and using this opportunity to also increase the social and the civic infrastructure without really, as Professor Mishra said, flooding the market with, developing enterprises on people who already exist. There was a discussion on this whole angle of this becoming a little easier for women, especially those who need to attend to home as well. And so this work from home is also to allow many other enterprises to allow women to come on board and to, operate from home will probably be another big win out of this COVID experience. And of course, last but not the least, about the partnerships and the collaboration. I think that came again and again. We need to do it together, whether it's for developing e-content or whether it's for developing, better protocols, or whether it's for developing, pushing the government and NSDC towards certain policies that really works for all of us. So these were some really valuable insights and suggestions that we heard from, and comments we heard from our really great group of panelists that I had. And I loved the last words where we talked about challenging ourselves, asking ourselves, are we really doing enough? Are we adapting? Can we adapt a little faster? How do we get agile? How do we change our strategy? Yet recognize, what we have done already in such a short period of time. I mean, in 3-4 months, there's already been such a movement that, as Vandana said, would have otherwise taken 5 years. So these are, I think, some of the positives. And of course, how do we manage and respond to this demand with, as she said, smart operative model with total agility. So I think this was on this really positive note. I'm delighted that we are exactly at 11:29. I'd like to really say a very, very big thank you to all three of you for having joined us today, Professor Mishra, Nusrat and Vandana. I mean, I know that today being this World Youth Skills Day, you must be all having your other pressing, engagements. And thank you so much for spending this morning time with us. As we saw, there were over 500 to begin with. The numbers come down slightly now. I also got a few messages from people who wanted to attend saying that, the house is full, so we are not getting an entry in. So I think some people lost out on that. But thank you very much for being with us. I cannot not say thank you to Ravi for managing this for us, and my whole ACF's backend team, which put this whole webinar together so efficiently. So thank you, all of you. Thanks to the participants who joined us and stayed with us throughout. I do hope we've been able to throw some insights which will be great take-homes for all of you, and for us to together develop this ecosystem for skilling much better than it was pre-March in India. So thank you very much. And with that, we can call this to close.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Paul. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.